Most of the large companies follow a policy of promoting internal candidates for their new roles or existing roles instead of looking out for external candidates. A thoroughly just approach which motivates employees, helps them grow professionally within the organization through internal mobility across various departments, and a great tool for the management to retain talents. However, it's a very common complaint that we hear from the floor, that is, the process is biased, not transparent enough. The hiring managers know perfectly well who to select even before the job is floated on the intranet or put on the notice boards. It's a bit of an eye wash, that is what we hear about. Eventually, it wastes everybody's time and kind of plays unfairly with the emotions and expectations of the applicants. A very strong allegation, isn't it? And yet we keep on hearing this in various forums, in people surveys, employee open door sessions, anonymous emails, and many other ways of communication. Is this really true? Is the process that unfair? Or is it that people generally miss the trick of approaching it correctly and hence they miss out, and instead of introspecting upon own shortcomings, they try to blame the system? Let us examine this in details, and as always, I will be sharing with you experiences from real life, right from the operations floor. But before that, if you have not done already, please subscribe to my channel Huddle Room and be updated on all such practical tips and tricks of operations. As a concept, promoting internal candidates for its existing or new roles as opposed to selecting external ones is really the best policy any company can adopt for its people. It helps people to grow and be motivated and be loyal to the company. However, in order to achieve this, most companies develop a kind of a tight mesh of procedures and rules around it, which managers generally try to escape from. What employees dislike most are managers who advertise a vacancy and yet have already decided who to appoint even before they advertise. There is also another problem that really deserving candidates might miss out, because ultimately everything boils down to those 45 minutes or 60 minutes of interview, and it is not uncommon to have a scenario where a really deserving candidate might lose out to someone who is less capable but can be fantastic in any interviews. Let us jot down some of the common complaints what we hear about. Number one, comfort zone of managers. Managers are comfortable in choosing people and putting them where they want based on who they know and what they know about those people. Number two, principle versus practicality. There is a distinct gap in thought process between corporate policymakers who design a system looking from a height of 20,000 feet above ground and hiring managers who run the business day in day out on the ground. The latter simply tick the box of procedures and continue to do whatever they have already decided to do. Number three, lack of transparency. Selection process is not transparent and rejected candidates are never given good reason or are explained why they were not selected. Before we delve deep into these allegations, let us also hear what the hiring managers have to say, what reasons they normally come up with behind closed doors. Number one, experience counts. Managers have to run the business and are answerable for the outcome and also for the performance of their team. It is only fair that they have the power to select the person who they know through experience will perform well in the role. Number two, lack of time towards learning curve allowance. Managers do not have a huge amount of time or spare capacity in their hand which can be spent on training completely newcomers from other departments who can be selected through an ideal internal selection process. They would rather prefer someone from the department who knows the job pretty well and can start running from day one. Number three, reward for good workers in the department. It is fair for good performers in a department to be selected for promotion or for a new role. That will not only encourage them to work to their full potential, but will also keep them motivated for a long-term career with the organization. On the other hand, if they know that their promotion opportunities are bleak and they have to compete with people who never worked for the department but might have done fantastic in an interview, that will take away all the enthusiasm to work. Number 4, succession planning. As a part of succession planning, the managers purposefully groom up the identified candidates, and their selection in internal job position is meant to be an important part of their grooming process. Well, there are some good reasons on both the sides, and the impact is this leads to a lot of flouting of principles and procedures. However, it will be a very wrong statement to make if I say that all companies or all departments do that. No, they don't. There are many organizations who genuinely believes in their people, who genuinely follows these policies and ensures that the procedures and principles are met very diligently. However, there are many such organizations which are very business driven, and the managers there work under very tight targets or pressures, and they are answerable for any dips from their target. In those companies, there is a greater tendency to bypass these laws or procedures, if you say. This entire internal job posting process or internal job advertisement process and the selection procedure, they have a little bit of hazy boundaries around it. People are not very clear as to what exactly happens within that so-called black box, if you like. And that actually has given birth to a lot of myths around the process. Let us first go through those myths and let's see whether we need to bust the myth or accept it. Unless we do that, it will be very difficult for us to approach it in the right way. Myth 1. I am a star performer. Obviously, I am the most deserving person to get promoted to the next level. Mythbuster. Your success will depend on your fitment for the role you have applied and not on basis of your past performance. This is an extremely important point which people sometimes tend to forget. Success in any selection process, and particularly the internal job posting process, depends on the candidate's fitment to the role advertised and not on the basis of performance of that person. Interviewers do not judge whether a person is good or bad. In fact, that is taken for granted that the person is good. Otherwise, he or she would not have landed there in front of the interviewing panel. What interviewers try to find out is that whether you are fitting to the role advertised. If you do not fit, that doesn't mean you are not good enough. That only means you are probably fit for some other roles. If you are a good performer, then probably what you can expect is a very good bonus at the year end. But whether you will be successful in an internal job posting process will absolutely depend on how well the interviewers will perceive you can do that role. Myth number 2. I do not need to prepare separately. After all, this is internal process and not external. Whether internal or external, you really need to prepare for the interview very well. As a rule, the interviewers normally do not adopt different approaches for internal interviews and external interviews. They have a very clear idea about the role. They have a fairly clear idea about the kind of role holder they expect, and they have a fair bit of assumption as to what the answers or responses to the questions would be. So whether it is internal or external, do prepare very well. Number 3, the interviewers know me, so I do not need to prove myself like the way I would have done in an external interview. Again, what is the myth buster here? It will not matter if the interviewers know you well or not. Normally, interviews are taken by a panel, especially with someone from HR and preferably someone from another process to maintain neutrality. If you work in a global organization, you might actually have 2 sets of managers, one locally in your entity and the other globally in the function where you have applied for. So you do need to prove yourself to all of them. Remember, the interview notes are recorded, and whether they let you know or not, they discuss on them internally before any decisions are taken. So it does not matter if the interviewer knows you. If you do not perform up to the mark, you will not be selected. Number 4, I do my job very well. It's expected that my leaders know that and have a favorable opinion about me during the interview. This is an important point, and I really want you to hear very patiently what I'm trying to say. In corporate world, no one has time and patience to memorize what good work you have done or what good work you're doing. And you may just hate to hear this, but most of the times whenever we think we are doing a great work, actually we are doing what we are already supposed to do as a part of our job, as a part of the salary which we get from the company. The other thing is, again, it's a bit controversial, but the corporate world unfortunately works on a little bit of show and tell business. If you think you have done really well, don't forget to tell that to the world that you have done so through various ways of communicating. Remember, we in corporate world, we are not like Einstein or Shakespeare that our work will speak for us. We have to speak for ourselves. And when people look at us from, let's say, 2000 feet above us, they hardly notice any material difference between us. More or less, we are all in the same level of competence, very ordinary people engaged in a rat race. Whatever little 2 inches or 3 centimeters up we think we are from our peer, that difference is not noticeable from a height. So if you think you have done good, make sure that you tell that to people who matters. But if you purely expect that I have done good, or rather I think I have done good, and that is why people should remember me, what I have done, and remember that in my interview process or etc., that does not work that way. The next myth, again a very common one, I know I won't be selected. X goes for a smoke with the manager regularly, or Y always raises hand for community services, which the skip manager is passionate about, or Z accompanies the super skip manager in a shopping whenever she comes for a visit. So obviously, I don't stand a chance before X or Y or Z. Well, what is the myth buster here? Believe me, unless your manager is an extremely corrupt person, the kind you see in films or maybe in a television soap opera, the fact of accompanying the manager for a smoke or shopping does not really influence interview process. Well, everybody loves a little bit of attention, that's a separate one. But whenever these kind of interviews or selection processes are involved, they normally don't allow to have their opinion swayed because of a personal preference or personal rapport with someone. And the reason is very, very simple. Remember, it does not help your manager in selecting an incapable person. If that person cannot do his or her job very well, any amount of smoking together or shopping together will not save the manager. He or she will be responsible for the lack of performance of his or her team. So regardless of pampering and good relations, the best fit normally wins in internal interviews. Now, having busted the myths, it's now time for us to look into the ways you need to prepare for such interviews. Let us divide our approach into 2 parts. A, the steps which you need to follow before the interview process, and B, how should you conduct yourself during the interview. So let's get down to the first one. What do you need to do before the interview process? Number 1, do prepare really well. It sounds simple, but something that is not done very frequently. So what are the points you need to keep here in mind? Number 1, understand the job, understand the requirements of the job, understand the technical knowledge required to discharge that job effectively, understand the softer skills required to discharge that job separately, and you need to show how prepared you are for the role during the interview. So collect all such materials from your current role or previous role in any organization where you believe you have displayed those characteristics which are relevant for the role you have applied for now. If situations permit, try to speak with someone from the department where you have applied for to get more insights into the role. No one will ask you questions about that department if you are not a part of that department, or that particular role if you have not involved yourself anyway within that. However, people will definitely try to find out whether you are fit for that role. So do try to speak with people to understand the requirements and then modulate your answers in a way that will prove your fitment. And as I told, people will look for instances where they can get a kind of confidence that you are fit for that role. So think a little, try to jot down all the points in your current role or a previous role where you might have displayed such competence which are now required. Number 2, hard and soft skills. Keep your focus on both functional aspects, which are hard technical skills, as well as softer skills, which might relate to your leadership abilities, your communication, empathy, collaborative nature, and so on. The balance between the two will differ according to the role and also according to the organization. For example, there are organizations which believe that senior people need not involve themselves with work on ground. Their job is getting the work done by others. Similarly, there are quite a number of large organizations which believe that everyone, regardless of their seniority, are expected to make their hand dirty and be actually involved in the work. Well, how far that involvement will obviously depend on the seniority. If there is a problem, they need to involve themselves directly and can actually direct them to get the work done. How well you need to exhibit your technical skills or leadership skills or softer skills depends on the organization, depends on the role you've applied for. Don't underestimate this. Modulate yourself, modulate your answers according to the philosophy of the organization. Next one, do go for trial runs and mock interview sessions. This is again a very important point and a sure tip for success. If you are lucky enough to have a manager or a skip manager who really wants you to progress in other departments, not directly under their control, do approach them for tips and request them for mock interviews. Practice those sessions very diligently. I can actually vouch on its effectiveness. And if you are applying for a role within that department and your manager or skip managers are actually directly involved in the selection process, obviously you cannot approach them for a mock interview. So in that case, approach other managers or other senior people in other departments who again are not directly involved in the selection process to obtain their help. And now, what are the things you need to keep in mind during the interview session? So the first one, maintain right balance. I have seen extremely enthusiastic applicants who really prepared very well, but during the interview they really overdid and it looked so synthetic and made up. Eventually they could not convince the interviewers. They were not selected. Similarly, there are ample number of people who display so little emotion and energy that obviously do not work in their favor. Remember one cardinal rule. Interviewers expect maturity, calmness and command over the subject matter required in connection with the role. Nobody really wants a hyperactive person who cannot control their emotions or a person who cannot display any kind of emotion or enthusiasm. Maintain the right balance. You need to carry the aura of a dependable person. That is all a manager expects. Someone they can depend and rely upon. And the last one is probably you have heard or read about in textbooks, that is be truthful. It's possible that you may not know all the answers. It's okay. Tell that. If you do not know, tell that. After telling that, you might still try to guess and tell that you're guessing, but you believe this is what the answer might be. However, if you want to hide your ignorance and try to deceive the interviewers, that might not be taken very well. Now, 2 more tips which you need to keep in mind always. These will increase your chance of getting selected in the role immensely across all organizations, including the ones where there is less focus on meeting the principles of internal job posting process diligently. Number 1, make yourself visible. It is important that you get yourself seen and make yourself heard. This pays well. More you climb up the corporate ladder, more you need sponsorship of senior persons in various departments to progress. If no one knows you except the people in your own department or your own manager, then very soon you will be stuck under a corporate ceiling. So do avoid that consciously. Look out for opportunities of involving yourself in various projects beyond your bread and butter duty. If your organization supports mentoring, get yourself mentored by a senior person who can guide you appropriately and increase your sphere of contacts. Number 2, never confine yourself to your desk or your laptop. If you think that as because you can do your job very well, your internal progression in the department or organization is guaranteed, then you're probably not correct. Success in corporate world generally depends on how well you are connected with the decision makers and other important people in your organization once you reach a particular level of seniority. They must know your worth. They must have confidence on your abilities. So don't be shy in projecting yourself. If you think this is not your forte and you are not comfortable in projecting yourself, then corporate world is really not for you. To be successful only by involving yourself in your own work and being in your own world, you need to be in those professions where personal skills or personal knowledge are very important, like let's say in a legal profession or maybe in a medical profession and some others. It's your life, you need to decide, but you need to play by rules of the game. If you don't like the rules, well, try another game. We need to keep one thing in mind. The world is not such a perfect place we want it to be. Those of you who are interested in literature might have read St. John written by George Bernard Shaw. Remember its ending lines, "My Lord, when will thy world be ready for thy saints?" Unfortunately, the world is still not ready for its saints. So we have to know how to survive and excel in this not so saintly world. Well, that's all for today. I'll be coming back again with another video with more such tips and tricks of operations. If you want me to cover any particular topic, do feel free to reach out to me through my social network, or you can send me an email. I'll be very happy to cover those. Enjoy your day, enjoy your work. Office can be a really wonderful place to be if you know how to enjoy your day. Thank you, goodbye, good luck. We'll meet again.